So I posted a picture for opening of Disney-MGM Studios. We did a denim jacket, not unlike this, with the embroidered Disney-MGM Studios. And by the way, all you bloggers and YouTube guys, the name of the park is Disney-MGM, not Disney. Boy. One. So anyway, they did this. And there was a woman that came to visit a friend of ours, Disney World, way, way back when. And she's a stand-up comedian from Boston. And I said, you're hilarious. You want to work for me? She says, well, I do stand-up, but we had to get special dispensation for her because she had a 58-inch waist, and that was too big to be on set. Because, you know, inside the park, in those worlds, there's no fat people. I don't know how Stromboli ever got a job. She was just hilarious, worked out great, ended up being our in-house scheduler. So she texted me, said, send me your mailing address. I thought, oh, okay, what's up? And she sent me her jacket. Yeah, oh, see? Pays to be nice to people back then, because there's some denim in your future. I'm going to walk you through real quickly the history.
If you don't want to sit, you can stand, just stand like this mark right here.
He's telling an actor where to stand and not move. Can I talk? Good afternoon. So nice to be here. Today we're going to talk about the fascinating world of Streetmosphere. Okay. Oh, there he is. Glad it has a wide-angle lens. Usually for me, they need an aerial photo. Anyway, I'm going to walk you through my history, because people say, sometimes someone will ask, how long were you with Disney? Let me show you one picture first. When we were first designing the studio, Michael Eisner was a big fan of my company, SAC Theater. You remember SAC at Epcot, Italy and the United Kingdom? Now they're downtown, SAC Comedy Lab. We were hired for 4 months of the opening of Epcot to do 10 shows a day in Italy, a month after Epcot opened. They said, do you have any more people? We said, we do 30 Renaissance festivals a year, sometimes 6 at a time. By Thanksgiving, we had a troupe in Italy and the United Kingdom. By the summer of '85, we were doing 45 shows a day at Epcot. Michael Eisner became a big fan of us. And as we first started to think about the Disney-MGM Studios, he said, now street theater, got us some street theater at the studio. I said, okay. And I thought, why would you just stop and do a show? And the Creative Entertainment Group said, or what I call lip-syncing Mormons tap dancing in front of castles. And I said, did I say that out loud? And they said, well, do it in the back lot because the trams come by. I said, the trams come by for 15 seconds. Thank you. You have a whole collection of those that you... And I kept thinking, I don't know. And I talked to Marty, I said, you got any ideas? You're a big fan of street theater. Because the first time I met Marty Sklar, shook my hand, he didn't say, he said, you ever thought about doing live actors in brick and mortar rides? Yeah. But only since April of 1967, when my family first wrote Pirates of the Caribbean, and my mom, my drama teacher, and I said, that was great. If only they had a few live actors, it would be fantastic. Marty said, when was that? I said, April 67. He said, we opened in March of 67. I said, we was busy in March, okay? True story. Fast forward 1,000 years, and we did a 35th anniversary party, sit-down dinner for Imagineering, big tables in front of Pirates of the Caribbean. But on the invitation that every Imagineer got for themselves and a guest, said, as soon as you get there, don't sit down, go to Pirates, new and improved. We re-recorded every voice in the ride. I did the pirate ship guy. Watch out for the rubber shark! And it was all about Disney versus Universal. The guy being dunked in the tank had a sign that said Sid Sheinberg. He ran Universal Studios. I later worked for him after I was at Imagineering. He was a guy who couldn't tell you the time of day without using the F word. And I don't mean fire truck. So everybody came, got on Pirates of the Caribbean, and before the drop, dead men tell no tales. I was standing there in a striped sport coat from Carnation Corner with a stack of Randy Bright's book, Disney, The Inside Story. This is Randy's the guy. He thought it all up. It was his idea. Walt was just a front man, just a nice, avuncular old guy. It was all his idea. And then you dropped in, and the place was mad. We put 30 actors and pirates, along with the existing. They didn't get off the ride. They went around the second time. About the third time, we had to stop and said, look, go eat dinner. During dinner, Frank Wells, the great Frank Wells, and I mean that sincerely, turned to Marty and said, why wouldn't we do that all the time? He said, you need to ask our friend Craig. And I said, Frank, you're not going to like the idea. And he said, what? I said, because the guys that run the park don't want to pay for it. That's money. They don't want to do that. He said, well, that's silly. You should do it. I said, yes. There are 6 big blank places inside Pirates where you could do that. So I've been dreaming of this forever. And I thought, so Marty says, let me show you something. Goes to his files, first slide, and brings out this picture. That's not the one. Slide number 1, please. Or just skip to slide number 1. Recognize that place? Main Street, USA, Disneyland, USA, 1955. That's not a security guy. It's just a guy being a Main Street cop. And Marty, who was hired by Walt the month before Disneyland opened, said, you know, Walt used to say, other people are going to do theme parks. They might be better. They might be bigger. They might be fancier. One of the ways we can stay ahead is surprise. So all around the park, they had these costume cast members themed to the area. Our friend Randy Bright, who was the Vice President of Creative Entertainment, he was hired right when they first launched the Columbia. And he was a sailor on the ship. Striped T-shirt, the whole thing. And he went out and did his homework, and he could tell you all about that ship and the great three-mast sailing of that time. They had, I remember as a kid meeting the spaceman with a big, fishbowl on his head. So there's a long tradition of just having characters in the area, bringing life to the area. We do an amazing job at Disney of building wonderful places, and there's nobody home. And I kept thinking. Meanwhile, I'm in high school. We moved to San Jose, and there's an article in the Puppeteers of America monthly magazine. My friend Jim Gamble, professional airline pilot and puppeteer. He said, hey, I'm building a Pinocchio puppet for Disneyland for their Christmas parade. It needs to be anywhere from about 5'5" to 5'10". Anybody available? Well, if you know anybody, even a part-time puppeteer, that's the busiest time of the year for them. That's like July for fireworks salesmen. They work solid. They'll do 3 malls a day. And so I called him and I said, I'm in high school, I'm living in San Jose, but I'm that size. He said, well, I know you could handle it. I've seen your shows. So they flew me down, tried the outfit on me, which wasn't even a costume. It was, some knee-high, anyway, tried it on. They said, you got the job. I said, could I see the puppet? 38 inches, 19 strings. The average marionette has 7, if it's fancy, 11 strings. With that many strings, it should have been pooping smoothies in its spare time. And it was just fantastic. I was contracted to do 2 20-minute parades a day for the run of Christmas, which was, I forget in those days, it was more than two full weeks. And they didn't know what to pay me, so Jim negotiated a contract where I got paid the same as union musicians. So I got paid for 8 hours a day. I tell you all this to say I didn't just show up on the bus last night. Next slide. My brother said, have you got any pictures of you doing Geppetto? I said, no, he found these a month ago somewhere in his stuff. That's me. The only thing we added is they wanted me to wear gloves, white gloves. And I said, Geppetto doesn't wear gloves. Yes, he does. I brought in a picture. He had the fingertips off because I said, with the gloves, I can't feel the strings. The other thing was this rubber head stuck out here, and I couldn't see the puppet without doing this. And then, he turned into Grandma Moses. So I got him to cut out the lining under the rubber underneath there, and they put a screen in so I could look straight down and see the marionette. And I took the fingertips off the puppet. They made me put makeup on my fingertips, which I wore for 1 rehearsal. Did that for 3 years. Great fun. Next. So the guys saw us at their Largo Renaissance Festival, SAC Theater, doing the street theater, and invited us to Epcot. 10 shows a day for 3 months. That was that the cover? Anyway, it was Travel and Leisure magazine. That's me on the right, 14 years old. No, without my, what they used to call at Disney, facial hair. And I'd say, look closely, it's a beard. So I did that for quite a while. And then one day we were called to the office at Disney Entertainment. And we went up, and there was Randy Bright and a kid named Bob Weiss. And they said, you know, we really like what you guys do, but we're worried about Future World. We think it's a little boring. And we said, did you figure that out on your own, or did you just talk to some guests? It's gray with some mauve accents. And so they invited us to come out to Imagineering, and we sat with a group of 40 pinheads and knuckleheads and just the craziest, most amazing people I ever known. And I need to tell you right up front, well, almost up front, that my years of Imagineering are the most blessed time of my life. It's the time I felt like, I belong here. I love doing this. When I was with people that were far smarter than me, and Ryan Harmon. And kidding, Ryan, I'm kidding. And just from our first day there, they said, by the way, you guys are Imagineers. And when you're there as a consultant, they give you a sticker that looks like an Imagineering name tag, Mickey, Sorcerer's Princess. They gave us real Imagineering name tags with our names on it. First day. We were there for a week, but we went every month for a week. And just, it worked out great. In the middle of that, I told them the story about meeting Walt Disney at the end of the Rose Parade in 1966. My mother did the reception. A bunch of us kids in the room got his autograph. He said, I want to sit down. I went and got a chair, running across the floor. Chair flew out of my hand, slid across the floor, hit Walt Disney in the shin. He went, oh! And I thought, I am going to hell in the next 40 seconds. I just knew I would. I went and stood in the corner, frozen. A minute later, hey! Turned around, we're low. It was an old elementary school that the Navy had taken over as a civil defense place. And I said, I'm sorry, Mr. Disney. I'm sorry. He said, I'm fine. I said, no, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hit you. He puts his leg up on the chair, lifts his pant up. He said, see, no black and blue. And he was wearing knee socks with a garter belt on. And he said, look, suspenders for socks. Isn't that cool? And the other one, too. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm 12. My birthday's the 4th. Write it down. This is January 1st. And I'm thinking, I just saw the Rose Parade, which is pretty good, but now I'm staring at Walt Disney's hairy leg. This is a minute I'm not going to get back. And I had a sketchbook with me, which I'd carried all my life. There's one right over there. And he said, what do you got there? Oh, it's my sketchbook. And he said, wow. And there was a little town there. And she said, oh, you like trains? I said, yes, sir. He said, you like my train? I said, which one? He said, what do you mean? I said, well, you've got 3 at Disneyland. He said, I do? I wanted to take his hand and say, okay, no, Mr. Disney, wait, no. I said, well, you've got the main Disneyland Railroad, goes around the park, yeah. You've got Rainbow Caverns, Mine Train, oh, yeah. And Casey Jr.'s. He says, I have 3 trains. I said, that's what I just said. He said, and I have one at home. I said, I've heard about that. It's pretty cool. He said, you should come by sometime. I thought, oh, I'll be there tomorrow. I told my dad, he said, we should go. And I said, what, do you just drop by? That was January. Walt died in December. But we're talking and this and that. And he said, what do you want to do with all this? Do you want to be an architect? And I said, not too much arithmetic. I said, well, I saw that guy on your TV show, Claude something. He said, Claude Coates. I said, yeah. And he was showing the new pirate thing you're going to do. He said, Pirates of the Caribbean. I said, yeah. And you said he was an he said, Imagineer. I said, yeah. I said, Mr. Disney, my head exploded at that word. Is that a real word? He said, yeah, we have a whole company that does that. I said, I'd like to be one of those. He poked me right here. I can show you the spot. I've never washed it. And he said, and so you shall be. Told that to Marty Scolaro, my first or second trip to Imagineering. He said, well, geez, now I got to hire you. That first week, they had a 10 o'clock, a reception on the patio to give a diamond stud to put in the name tag of one of their 50-year employees. It was Claude Coates, 6'7". Marty took me over and just introduced me to Claude. And he said, oh, that's Keen. That was Claude's word, if he likes him. That was Keen. And we got to be good friends. If you met somebody for 2 seconds at Imagineering, you got to be friends. It was just that kind of place. Well, I don't know. Now I'm trying to think. There might have been somebody I didn't get along with, but. So eventually ended up there full time. And Michael kept saying, street theater for a studio tour, street theater. And I thought so much my head started to hurt. And then one day I'm sitting in the room, we'd gotten 200 pictures for potential storefronts for Hollywood Boulevard. And I looked up and there was this painting that this kid on our staff there did, Eric, because somebody said, you know, there's always the last house on the boulevard. And here is this painting. I think it's the next slide. Nope. Oh, This was when I was at Imagineering. I would go down and put on a Keystone Cop outfit at Christmas, and just wander the streets before the parade. And nobody noticed that I had a facial hair. Next. So this was the early, I'm writing this lady a ticket. And the guy came up to me and said, "You work here?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You don't have to be at Disney. They don't need anything else, and they send you out to do something extra." I said, "Fine." So during the Christmas, cast Christmas party, I would do that. Okay. So Michael said, "Go over to Universal. They've got characters there." Well, they had all these lookalike characters. So they had Lucy and Desi and W.C. Fields that a friend of mine did for years. And they were all brilliant young actors that had really honed their, but there might as well have been cardboard cutouts, because they would just stand there and guess what's, "Oh, look, there's W.C. Fields, who's dead. Oh, look, there's Lucy and Desi," and, you know. But I would go over and talk to them, and they were really good actors, and some of them really had the characterizations down. But 90% of their interaction with guests was, "Can we have our picture taken?" Whoosh, and they'd move on. I just thought, nah, that's not interesting for me. Next. Then Eric painted this drawing, because we said there's the last house on the boulevard. And the team came up with the name Sid Cahuenga's one-of-a-kind shop. Sid for Sid Grauman, Cahuenga for the street in Florida. And I'm sitting there in a meeting one day, and I just went, "Ah! You okay, McNair?" I said, "Yeah. If there's a Sid Cahuenga's one-of-a-kind shop, there's a Sid Cahuenga somewhere." So I got out my sketchbook, and I drew this. And it's based on an actor that I knew in Minneapolis, Al Erasmus. And I thought he could just stand out front and say, "Hi, how you all doing? Come on inside, we got a lot of movie stuff in here." You know, didn't care about all this stuff. So when we were going to Minneapolis for auditions, he would work at night as an actor, and then during the day, he worked at a place where he made sandwiches. And I said, "I want you to audition for me for Disney." He said, "Why would I work at Disney? You're so relentlessly patriotic and fancy." I said, "Well, let me send you." So I sent him this and a little pair. I said, "Now, when you get there, don't admit you know me or anything. Just do your thing." So, "You got a Hawaiian shirt?" He goes, "Yeah." "So you got a Borsalino straw hat?" "Yeah." I said, "Plastic cigar or real cigar? I don't care." I said, "Roll your pants up a little bit." So, and I said, "Just easy, salt of the earth guy." So we would bring them in every city. We'd bring them in 10 at a time. Next slide. So this is the crew. Start at the bottom. I don't know who that is. The next one is Roger Cox, who directed Adventures Club. He didn't write enough letters, and they tore it down. But they put something so much better there, don't you think? Tom Schroman in the Yellow Comedy Warehouse. Ronnie Rodriguez, who was the coordinator for a lot of entertainment stuff and hiring thing. And the good thing about him being with us in all cities is everybody that we would eventually identify to be hired, he was the first one to give him a call and offer him a job. It was great. Disney does something very smart. I don't offer anybody a job, because I don't want to spend the next 6 years that I know them with them saying, "You should have paid me $450. You know, so-and-so was making $400. And then the next guy is a friend of mine, Steve Hansen, who played a Nazi in Indiana Jones. I don't know why he was there. I think he was there at some creative entertainment. I wanted to have somebody there. He never directed anything in any of those 3 projects, but good guy. And then a younger version of me in the end. 10 cities saw over 2,000 people. And that was for those 3 shows. Next. So I told Al, don't admit you know me. So when it's his turn, he comes up. He's standing there. And Ronnie Rodriguez says, "That's your guy, that's your guy." And he's going through my stack of pictures. And he goes, "Look, look, look." And I said, "Yeah, pretty close." When I did the presentation to Eisner and some of the other leadership folks at the studio, I put about 25 pictures up of the citizens of Hollywood. And then I would do a characterization of each one. And one of the things I learned from doing street theater at Epcot was with Dreamfinder. We had at one time 3 guys doing Dreamfinder. All of them terrific. Honest to God, terrific. But a kid would come up to Streamfinder and say, "Hey, remember me? I was here Tuesday." Well, right now he's talking to Steve Taylor. Tuesday he was talking to Ron Schneider. Kid doesn't know that. I mean, could have fooled me. They all look alike. So what I did was every character had their own name, their own personality. Even though I had a friend of mine that I'd worked with in Hoop-de-Doo, Susie Marshall, to be our big hat gossip columnist. But then on tour, I found another gal, and I said, well, I'm not hiring Susie. So they both had their own name, their own look, so you knew they were different. Even, and you're going to meet in a minute, one of my longtime buddies and Streetmosphere people, Joe he had his own character and his own personality. And the other police had their own character and their own personality. So I made sure that everybody's individual. So I did a presentation of all those characters. Eisner loved them right away, and I said, they'll be on Hollywood Boulevard. There'll be no less than 3 of them at a time on the boulevard, and then others will come out, in and out, and so on. There'll be kind of a lot of them all at once in the middle of the day when the parks are busiest. People loved them. Bruce LaValle, who ran the park, I was down there about a month or 2 after we opened, and he said, come with me. We went up on the top of Newberry's. That's the building that's shaped like this. You come down, and the lake is over here. He said, watch, 2:45. And guests started to gather and all of a sudden the police came out. All right, there's been a murder here, ladies and gentlemen. We have to stick around. We need people to give evidence. So they were laying out, you know how you lay out a body? They did it with police tape, except it was a stick figure. Very seriously, I guess. All of a sudden, there's 300 people who a minute ago were looking for something to do. No, they came there. And then over here, 50 people with the guy who's selling maps to the stars' homes. When I first did the presentation to the Creative Entertainment Group, the head of that group, who's a friend of mine, so I won't mention his name. I don't think Ron Logan would mind, but I just won't bother him. And he recently passed away, unfortunately, but good guy. And he said, well, what's the guy going to sell? And it was a Hawaiian shirt, you know, a lawn chair and a big sign, Maps to the Stars Home. I said, well, I've ordered 500 Maps to the Stars Home that they sell in Hollywood. So you didn't do maps for here? I said, no, we're not here. There's no stars here. Well, they're going to sell them? I said, yeah, $3. Well, you sell? I said, Ron, if we sell one, that's $3 more than the Creative Entertainment Division has ever made in the history of World Showcase Dancers and Kids of the Kingdom. Okay? Those are great shows. They are what they are, but they're not this. So we didn't get the maps right away. So we finally got them, and I'll show you the kid's picture in a minute because he was going on to bigger things. You've seen him in movies, you just don't know him. Great character actor. So I said, let's do it. We got the maps. Said to go through a class of how to count out money. He's got the apron with the maps. He's got the sign that says Maps to Stars Home. He's got his chair. And he's coming out of the backstage gate right there by the gas station. Before the gate even closed, the guy goes, what are you doing? Guest. I got Maps to the Stars Homes. See where Miss Desi Arnaz and Miss Lucille Ball live. And the guy says, how much are they? They're $3, sir, but I got to set up at my spot. So let me have one. He says, no, I don't have a license for here. I got my spot is around the corner, which is in front of the store that looks like a camera. Before he set up, he had sold 2 maps. $6 a head of Creative Entertainment. I mean, their hats cost 10 times that. Sold a passel of these puppies because it was a way that any guest could suddenly be a part of the show. And that's the idea, to take the show to the streets, to the people. So Ronnie grabbed that and he said, look at this guy. And he's standing up, there's Al saying, hi, Al Erasmus. I said, what do you do, Al? He said, I'm an stage actor. I work at Sergeant Preston's making sandwiches in the daytime. I said, I think I had one of those, meatloaf with 11 grain bread. 9 grains, sir, 9 grain. We don't do 11 grains. I said, if you asked for 11 grains, he'd point his knife at you and say, name me 11 grains. And I said, well, yeah, he could do it. I'm playing real low-key. He said, no, he could do it. Look at the picture. It's him. So he did a decent audition for what it was, and Tom and Roger were in on the hoax, but didn't. So he goes and he sits down, and as he's leaving the room, he says, nice to see you, Craig. And he's leaving, and Ronnie's like, let's show you Al Erasmus as Sid Cahuenga. Next slide. He's in the making of, if you watch the videos. And he would just stand out front and do his thing. He was a brilliant, wonderful guy. He took to it. And Mrs. One of a Kind on the right, that's what he called her. He said, my name's Sid Cahuenga, One of a Kind. This is my wife, Mrs. One of a Kind. He was terrific. So, opening day of rehearsals, I said, okay, I'm going to give you some words that you're never ever going to say again. Disney-MGM Studios, Walt Disney World, theme park. We're in Hollywood, California, boys and girls. It's 1947. And if we were doing Music Man, we're in River City, Iowa. And we never say anything. We had a meeting with marketing at Disney World, and they showed us our logo, Disney-MGM Studios. And across the bottom, in a big blue thing that added theme park. And we're like, what? Well, we got to, that'll just be for the ad so people know what it is. I said, it's Disney-MGM Studios. Eisner said, well, what are they, Universal? I said, Universal calls it Universal Studios. Disney-MGM Studios. That's it. That's what it's called. Leave it alone. And I said, you add theme park on there, and you have written Universal's ad. A year later, Marty called me down to his office, handed me the Delta Airlines brand new in-flight magazine. You open up, 3-page spread, aerial painting. Not just a theme park, a working movie studio. In order to be in marketing at Disney World, you have to know how to screw down a turnstile. Next. So we hired 33 actors. This is, I'm sorry it's so grainy, but this is the Cahuenga family picnic. We're in Cleveland, and this kid gets up, huge, gorgeous, sings like an angel, hilarious. And I said, thank you, Peter, that was great. Sit down, I'll talk to you in a minute. I looked down at my notes, I looked back, and there he is again with another outfit. Identical twins. So I said to him, I said, you guys get along? I said, what do you mean? Do you work well together? I said, why? I said, it does me no good to hire twins unless I can have you out there at the same time. If one of you works in the morning, one of you works in the afternoon. There's nothing in that. They were great. They worked with the Omita guy who worked with them. So that was just one day for fun. I said, everybody wear a Hawaiian shirt tomorrow. We're going to do. And this is me, as usual, not paying attention. Sorry for the graininess. And this hung in Cahuenga's foil. Next. And that's the cast and so on. So a friend of mine, I don't know if you can see it, you'll see it. Go to the next slide, we'll come back to this. Marty called me to his office one day and it said, the anniversary of Epcot, things to see, things not to see, by Craig Wilson. Well, my full name is Craig McNair Wilson. So Marty says, oh, just go over this, your article here. Well, he knew it wasn't me, but there's this guy that wrote it, the USA Today for years, Craig Wilson. Now I'll go back. So I invited him to the opening. He said, oh, they won't let me come. I said, Disney will pay for your trip. They'll pay for your hotel. They'll pay for your meals. You do not have to write a word. Just come. Well, okay, he comes down. I said, this is amazing. This is amazing. What's the hook? What's the hook? I said, it's a live theme park. I said, what do you mean? I said, we have 5 attractions here. They all have live elements that if you took them out, you'd have to close the attraction. Great movie ride, monster sound show, superstar television, and so on. So well, would you put some, he says, I want to put a picture in there somewhere. I said, no, it's a cover story. Pay attention, Craig. And it's Sid Cahuenga standing in front of the Disney-MGM art. Maybe one of my other characters is the starlet right off the bus. I said, you're a generic guest kid, and we pulled this kid out of the audience. And then I said, I'll get a couple of mice in there for you. And it's the cover story. He said, yeah. I didn't see it till a day after it came out. You get busy. And of course, Michael and others thought I made that happen. I didn't. I suggested it. Things happen. Next. So I get this memo before opening. It said you need to select a dozen of your characters to be out on opening night. I said, yeah. I'm going to tell 22 actors they can't be at the opening. I don't think so. They're going to fire me? So I told my stage manager, said, Angie, I've got the list of who's going to be on there opening night. So I hold up this list, and I said, I've got a list of the people who are going to be out for opening night, mingling with all the movie stars. And I'm sorry, I know you all wanted to be there, but Disney just said 12. Here's the list, and it was the entire cast. That's about an hour before we open, but they're all there. Where are the twins? Doesn't matter. Michael Marzella, who had played Henry VIII at Renaissance Festival, had to shave off a big beard. Barry, who stood out on, he was a flim-flam man, stood out on the street with a TV tray and sold toy King Kongs and toy sharks and fun things. And we can't, oh, here's one of the twins. And there's the other one. If you remember Mo Collins from Parks and Recreation, brilliant actress, hilarious. But that's the whole group, opening cast First day of rehearsal, I said, you know, when you come across the bridge from New York into New Jersey, there's a sign that says, "Welcome, New Jersey. Try our thick, creamy shakes." And that was the reaction. Somebody said, "Well, it doesn't make sense, McNair." I said, "But it's hilarious, isn't it?" No. I said, "Right, it doesn't make sense. Try our thick, creamy shakes is the rule of thumb for Streetmosphere. You're just a character. You use the crosswalks. You don't walk in the middle of the street. You don't stand in the middle of the street with a toy car and do a show. That's street theater. We're not doing that." Okay. So when we did our jackets with the Disney-MGM logo right here, I just did a little silkscreen, "Try our thick, creamy shakes." And every once in a while I'll get an email that starts with, "Try our thick, creamy shakes." Gotcha, how are you, Craig? But that was the opening day crew. Very talented, almost all of them super talented. Jay Hopkins is now head of SAC Theater Comedy Lab downtown. If most of them gone on to greater things. The stories you could tell. What is the next slide? I think that's the last one before we get to. Yes. But they were out there all day, every day. Everybody loved them. Got a note one day. Marty wanted to see me. I went backstage. Marty says, "You know, Eisner said he's in the park all the time. He never sees the Streetmosphere characters." I said, "It's soft opening. We're never there. We're not ready. We don't have costumes yet." Well, he just said, "You know, it was a great idea. He loves the idea, but let's just cancel it." I said, No. My pal Eric Jacobson, Mr. Great Moments of the Movies. That was the original title of the ride, attraction. He gets, every quarter, he gets to do an update with the guys. And as well he should. I did one presentation. Michael Eisner said grand slam, which is, you know, if it's good, they say home run. He said grand slam. I was still a consultant. I think it was Eric from the back of the room yelled, "Grand slam, he doesn't even work here. He's just a consultant." And I said, "Well, you know, when you're good, you're good." And I said, "I want a project update for Streetmosphere. I want Michael Eisner and you and me and Bob Weiss on Hollywood Boulevard and 30 minutes to do a presentation." Marty says, "That's fair." Well, we had Michael, Jeffrey Katzenberg, you remember him? His preferred pronoun is stand up. And Bruce Laval, who ran the park, was there. Some others, quite a gathering. I said, "Now, in the next half hour, you're going to see all 33 of the citizens of Hollywood. There will be no time during operation where you'll see all 33 of them, but you'll see 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, and they'll tumble over, and others come in, and others leave." So we're standing watching the police do their murder investigation with the stick figure, which right away they loved. And all of a sudden, there's 200 or 300 people, and I go, "Geez, wow, you know, just..." And then Jeffrey taps me and says, "What about him?" And right over here was a park bench, or a bus stop bench. Solid wood, concrete, and there's a little girl sitting there, and Susie Marshall, my friend that I did Hoop-Dee-Doo review with for years, she's, "Now tell me, your new motion picture, it was supposed to be you and Ray Milland, but the latest word is that it's just, well, they had to change. He wasn't available." This girl is 5 years old. She's a guest. Nobody's ever seen or heard of her in their lives. And Jeffrey comes in, "What's that? What's that? What's that costing us?" I said, "Oh, I didn't know you were paying for this. If you're paying for it, I'm going to put more money into the project." I said, look across the street. See the father with the Super 8 camera and see the mom wiping her eyes? They're going to go home. And that little girl's going to have 2 stories. I met Minnie Mouse, and this lady interviewed me for a movie magazine about my new movie I'm in. That works. And I had not realized, but coming up behind us was the diminutive Michael Eisner, and he gives Jeffrey a shot. "You get it? You get it?" And Jeffrey, I get it. So I said, it's going to be shows of all different sizes happening spontaneously here on the street. And that's what it was for quite a long time. I think that's the last one, and then I've got some more. Let me bring to the stage one of the most talented comical people I know, Joe Wesson, taught at Ringling Brothers Clown School. And when we were going to do Streetmosphere, I knew I had to have Joe, and I called him. I said, just show up. Oh, I forgot to tell you, at the end of the group that Al Erasmus was in as they're leaving the room, he turned around and says, "Nice to see you, Craig. Good to see you, Al." Boom, and Ron, they realized I knew the guy already. But Joe Wesson, join us up here. And also, live from Batu in 1977, a friend of mine and I, he was invited, and he asked me to join him to do some street theater at the Minnesota Renaissance Festival, largest festival in the country. And he asked me, and we sat down at a coffee shop, and what are we going to call it? And I said, well, you know, my mom used to do paper bag theater, and drama class, and you'd have a bag, and you'd pull out a top hat and a cane and a monocle, and you'd be a character. And we bag theater, and his wife was a teacher, said, SAC theater. And I said, wrote S-A-C-K. I said, no, S-A-C looks like strategic, S-A-K, S-A-K. So we went to the Minnesota Renaissance Festival, and after like the second day, was it, Herbie? They said, you know, we've got another festival coming up in Kansas City was next? In Kansas City. That was 1977. By 1982, we were doing, as I said, 30-plus festivals a year. And Herbie is still out there. You'll see some pictures of him. Herb Hansen, the incomparable. Have a seat, guys. There's Joe. So when I left to go do Imagineering, Herbie and I made monthly trips out to do Imagineering. So he was in on a lot of the projects we've been talking about. Next slide, please. Good, and then the next one. So this is Herbie as Otto von Bunbun, right?
Film director or genius, yeah. Thank you.
He's just, you may recognize his outfit. He's just in from Batu. I went to opening day of Batu in Disneyland. I got a red ball cap and had stenciled on it, "Make Batu Great Again." Put it on the alumni, Imagineering alumni web page, Facebook page. And one of my buddies, kind of tough architect, Debbie, says, "McNair, you should have made it red. It looks like a Trump hat." And I didn't say anything. And then a whole bunch of my Imagineering buddies says, "Well, Rieger, that's the joke." Sometimes it's better if you don't explain it. And this is Herbie's lovely wife, also known as Dorma Nesmond, film screen star. She's brilliant, as good as it gets. I never worked directly with her, but, you know, if she's out there, I'm going to watch. Joe, tell us a story.
Once upon a time.
Next slide while we're doing this.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I was with the Everything Truck. The first year of Streetmosphere was the Everything Truck, and then the year after that, it kind of broke up, and we became the Hollywood Public Works. Well, the Everything Truck was the Hollywood Public Works, the Hollywood Police Department, and the BLT Studios film crew. And then we had a 1946 Chevy Stylemaster that we drove around, and we would change the sign. We had these magnetic stickers that we'd stick on the side of the car. One was like BLT, another one was the Hollywood Police Department, the other one was Hollywood Public Works. So whatever we were going out to do, we'd slap that on. We'd put on the different outfits. And we would we were originally, when it was originally, the concept of it was that we were going to go out and we were going to start off as one group of characters, and as the routine would go, we would, like, one of us would leave and go in the truck and change and come out as another one, and so by the end of the show, we would be have gone, you know, a whole different cast. But then several things got in the way with that. One of them was that we had the truck on order. We didn't get the truck till about 5 or 6 months after we opened. So we had rehearsed all these routines with the truck in mind, and then we opened, and so we improvised a lot new routines without a truck, which were fine, which actually worked for us. But then, but the other thing, when we got the truck, you couldn't really stand in it, because the idea was it was going to be a truck that you could get in, change your clothes. But I mean, if we would have tried to get into it, we would have been like this, changing our clothes. And it was like, okay, that didn't work. So what we ended up doing was we'd do like 2 sets of Hollywood Public Works,
That's Joe taking a break against the truckers.
Yes, and I got a little attached to the truck there. And but there would be two sets of Public Works, 2 sets of the police, and 1 set of the film crew. And then by the next year, they decided, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to just make you guys the Public Works, then we're going to have a separate couple people be police, and then we're going to get a film crew. And so then it just became what was the Everything Truck, and people still called it the Everything Truck for about almost 10 years. Yeah. It was almost 10 years. In fact, the truck itself was called the Everything Truck for all that time. And we became the Hollywood Public Works, and But a couple of things I remember. Well, one thing, just to go back a little bit, because you were going back before Streetmosphere opened, and there's a little seed of Hollywood Public Works that was back in Epcot. There was a show that was being developed, and I can't remember the name of the show, but it was a SAC Theater. You guys were developing a show that was going to be three physical comedians, like Three Stooges. It was like a Three Stooges, space-age Three Stooges. And there was a vehicle that we were designing, and I can't remember the director's name from SAC that was working with John
Was it
Fox.
Gary, maybe, or?
No, it was another director at SAC was working with John Fox. I can't remember his name.
Never mind.
But anyway, he and I and John would get together and talk about the plans and costumes and stuff, and we were like these three Three Stooges in a future world, and it was going to be like a relief for when the rides would break down or there'd be an extra long line. And so we were working on it, developing it, and it was going along and having all these meetings. Okay, it was great. This is going to happen. And then one day I saw John, say, "Hey, John," and he said, "It's not going to happen." And what happened was there was a meeting with Disney, with the execs, and they were like asking SAC, "Okay, what are your new projects you have coming up?" And they said, "Well, we got this, and we got this," and they're describing them. And when they brought this one, and this is for line relief for when rides break down, they'll come out and do all this slapstick comedy. And he went, "No, our rides do not break down." No. So that was gone. And so that was kind of like the seed of the idea of this, because John was one of the people working on this, John Fox, and John Fox ended up being the co-director for the Hollywood Public Works, well, for the Everything Truck. And so it's like I always had that in the back of my head as being, okay, that was the seed of this whole thing. But so that's kind of like where the idea, the little sparkling of the Hollywood Public Works Everything Truck. But I just wanted to mention something, and I'm going to stop rambling so you can say something. But there was a couple of times in rehearsal when we were getting ready, because Streetmosphere, it was a brand new thing, and they weren't used to the size that people were, because they were used to dancers being, very trim and slim, and so people like Michael Marzella that you saw a while ago, and the
6'8",
twins,
6'6"?
yeah, and the twins that you Peter and Paul, they're big guys, and so they were like, oh what are we going to do? Then like with me, when I went to get my fitting, I don't know if you remember this, but I went to get my fitting. And we're with this, what was he? Was he Academy Award-winning costumer? But we're in there with him, and it's like, okay, and I don't know if you guys know this this old famous Mexican clown. He's called Cantinflas, and he had...
Around the World in 80 Days, he's the partner to David Niven.
And he had his outfit, he always had, his crotch was always way down here. And so I wanted, as a tip of my hat to him, I wanted to have my crotch way down here. And he was like, "Oh, no. And Craig went, "Yeah, I like that. Yeah, make it like that." So and he's like, oh. And then I wanted, because of my background, I wanted really big feet. And so it's like, okay, I had a friend who had made his own clown shoes one time. But see, if you do regular shoes really big, their toes are going to hit each other. So my thought was, okay, big shoes, but on opposite feet. And so I said I wanted, like size 13 shoes. And, I wear size 9.5. And he was like, no. And Craig was like, yeah. Craig was like, hey, yeah, I like that. Thank goodness Craig was in there with me, because Craig was like, yeah. The only concessions that I ended up having to make, and it was kind of like you with the fingers in the thing, was that he said, because I asked for some basics. Basics is like when the characters have the black shorts and T-shirt, and I asked for some basics to wear underneath the clothes, and he said, why? And so I want them to wear underneath my, the public works outfit and stuff. I said, No. You're wearing the pants for the police. So his idea was there's the pants for the police and the shirt, and that was the core outfit. And then whenever you became the film crew, you would put on like a vest and a cap. And when you do the Hollywood Public Works, you would put on the suspenders. That was his, and the hard and the other cap for that. We didn't have hard hats in the beginning, but I got some. But it was like, no. And I said, no, I can't wear those. Those pants were wool. So he wanted me to wear wool pants. Oh, he wanted me to wear wool pants with that Hollywood Public Works outfit. And so I was like, no. And he said, no, you have to wear them. That's the way it's designed. You have to wear it that way. So, okay. So we opened, and then I just went ahead and went to wardrobe, and I picked up my clothes and said, can I get some shorts, T-shirt? Thank you. And so I was like...
Probably spent half as much time retraining behind-the-scenes people as we did the cast.
Yeah.
But, Herbie?
Yes, sir. That reminds me of a quick story. When we first opened at Epcot, we were Il Teatro di Bologna. And the first day at Epcot, not everything worked really well. And while we were
Like American Adventure, the whole thing?
while we were hawking our show, we'd say, right over here, ladies and gentlemen, right over here, big show, no line, doesn't break it down, come on right over here.
It's live. It works every time.
The vice president of entertainment came up to me after the show and he says, Herbie, that line about doesn't break down, that was really funny. Don't ever say it again.
Same encounter, me and Bill Sullivan, who ran Epcot. And I'm saying this, and he says, you know, it hurts my feelings. I said, well, Mr. Sully, that's what everybody call him. I said, no place in my contract does it say don't hurt Sully's feelings. How much you pay to get in here today? Nothing? Good. You'll get your money's worth.
That's right.
Another week or two later, he comes by and he said, you're right. It's not about me. I said, it's not. You know? So there was a lot of that because they had never done stuff like this. Preview weekend for Epcot. We're out there doing our Romeo and Juliet, getting a senior citizen male, senior citizen female to be Romeo and Juliet. Before the show's over, they're kissing, they're dying on the street. And the cast members are coming up from all over the park. Are you guys Disney? You're so sarcastic. Are you guys Disney? Are they going to let you do this? Or this is just for the party, right? No, we're there. Okay. Same thing with Imagineering. When they found out we weren't officially Disney cast members, we were a contract group, then they said, come on down. Well, go ahead, Herbie.
Well, there's something kind of going along your story there that reminded me of, and this goes back to we're talking about Epcot, but one time, because sometimes working with Streetmosphere at the studios, for quite a while there, we were the only one of the parks that had the Streetmosphere characters going, and then the other ones started getting them too, but they didn't have them over at the other than having SAC Theater, but they didn't have them at like Epcot. So they had brought us in. There was some car show, some car thing they were doing at Epcot, and so for like a week, I was over there as like a mechanic. And so I was going in doing sets as this mechanic character, and I was going around, and then I was doing different things, and I'd go over to this battery, and I'd be talking to people, and big laughs and all that stuff, ha ha ha. And I was doing that, and I was doing it on my sets, and finally one day this guy came up to me and go, oh yeah, that's very funny. That's very funny. You make me laugh, but don't do that. Our batteries don't shock people. No one will get shocked touching that battery. And I was like, okay. Thank you.
We broke a few.
Try our thick, creamy shakes.
So one of the happiest days of my life was when Craig decided to come help me start SAC Theater. And one of the saddest days of my life was when he left to go to Imagineering. It all worked out, though. I was with Citizens of Hollywood for 12 years as a performer. I started with Disney as a producer, producing shows. And what Joe was talking about is we are on a yearly contract, SAC Theater at Epcot. We started out with one show. We ended up with 7. Every year when it came close to...
He says one show. So Italy, 12 shows a day is one show.
Yeah.
And then we got up to doing 45 performances a day.
And every year when it got close to negotiation, we said, okay, let's not worry about this show. Let's come up with a whole bunch of new ideas and throw at the entertainment staff so they take their focus off giving us our new contract. And it worked for 7 years.
And we, every year, because we did a morning shift and an afternoon shift, we wanted to have a company party once a year. When do you do that? You're open 30. So the contract would end on the 29th of November. And next year's contract would begin on the 1st of December. So there was a day that we weren't contracted for every year at Epcot for 7 years. So we had a picnic in the afternoon, and then we had a big fancy party in the evening, dance and awards banquet and so on.
That was fun.
So many stories, so many stories.
Let me get philosophical for a moment.
Please, because I can't.
One of the things that was so important in SAC and later on Citizens of Hollywood that we brought into it is that the guests that we use in our shows are the stars. If anyone is made to look foolish, it's us. And that was a big thing of the success of SAC. The guests are the stars. Now, you've seen a lot of audience participation that use guests as fodder, use guests to bring them on stage and make fun of them, put a stupid costume on them, and so we could all laugh at them. We didn't do that. We tried to make them stars. Really important. And I think that's one of the reasons it kind of went to the wayside, because they kind of lost that fever of making the guest the star.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that always got me confused is I'd get a note. I was doing Hoop-de-Doo Review, Pioneer Hall, and you'd get there and you'd sign it, and there'd be a note that said, VIP, second show, do a great show. So I'd take it and I'd go to the head of food service. I said, so 5:30 is first show, second show, and so it's the middle show you want us to do a great show. The first show and the last show we can do our usual pile of dog poop, right? No, that's what I'm saying. I said, read the note. Do a great show, middle show. I said, I do a great show every night. I don't care who's here. So now we get this note, and it says, VIPs, Thursday, and there's these two tables in the middle of the Pioneer Hall. VIPs, underline. I said, okay, great, I don't care. I do it for... We go out, and there is these two gentlemen with all their kids, no wives or moms. And it's Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, and I thought, I'll never be in one of their shows. So all night long, I'm serving beans and all the other things to everybody, and I ignored Lucas and Spielberg, Spielberg. We get done and we get a handwritten note. Thanks for a great show. Thanks for not ignoring us. Because people at that level get ushered around, like this little herd of lepers that have visited Disney World. And we wouldn't do that. And we'd look out doing a street theater show in Italy, the United Kingdom. And there in the audience would be some famous actor. I think I told you one other time with some other people. I looked out and there's this guy in a hat, and I went over and stood next to him. He said, you're not going to use me? I said, no, just want to say hi. Thanks. He said, terrific. I said, thank you. I said, stick around afterwards. And afterwards he came over and I said to my two friends I'm working with, I said, you guys know my friend Dustin Hoffman? He said, this is amazing. I could never, how do you do this? I could never, if you wrote it down for me. I said, it's all written down. 90% of what you just heard is on paper. We just do a script. So I get a call one day from a friend of mine at the White House. She's secretary to Edwin Meese, Attorney General of the United States. She said, the Meeses and their friends are coming to Epcot. Could you spoof Mr. Meese in one of your shows? I said, he's Attorney General who put me in jail for my life. I don't even look like Trump. And he said, no, he'll like it. And I said, and I'd met him. I said, nice guy, but I don't know. So he comes, and I go and pick him as Romeo, and he does everything you're supposed to do, kisses the lady, and Romeo dies. He laid face down in the street. He was a method actor. I didn't know that about him. As he laying there, I turned over. I said, sorry, you've done a lovely job today. You must be an actor or have experience in the 30s. He said, not me, but my boss has done a lot of stuff. I have a picture of us. So you'd get those, but we had a rule in SAC. If Herbie's mom and dad came through, I wouldn't use them, because they'd stiffen up. They'd want to do it. If my dad came through, whatever, that's what we did. Do us a favor. Next time you're in the Disney-MGM Studios, go to guest relations and complain about Streetmosphere. Say, and don't take any of their excuse. If their answer begins with the word well, it's an excuse. Any sentence beginning with well is an excuse and a lie. And, well, actors echoed in. No. I said, bring them back. Is there someplace I can write that down? Who do I write to? If you're lucky, they'll give you an email or something. unless we all get, and that's true on anything. Your favorite sandwich at your favorite diner. You got to tell them you love it. Nobody ever says anything because we love it. Why would we bother? Guests love to complain. We're not very good at complimenting. Thanks for coming. Thanks for going away.